Alright, so here's kind of a short video to explain how I got to where I'm at with what I'm telling you to check. We've got all your codes here. A bunch of them you can see are going to be circuit codes, high and low voltage. So typically when you have a high voltage, it's because you have lack of ground. When you have low voltage, obviously lack of power. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to look at all these codes and we're going to see what they could all have in common. Do they have common power supplies? Do they have common ground supplies? All that good stuff. So if I remember correctly from looking at our wiring diagrams we've got back here, pretty much everything on this list runs through the PCM. Now, as you can see right here, I've got PCM controlled. And your data lines, your class 2 communication, your data lines actually run through your modules. So if you have a module goes down, it will mess up the communication lines. Excuse me. So we've kind of made a list of everything we're going to look at. Everything goes through the PCM besides, I think, the O2 sensors. And when we look at the O2 sensors, we've got power coming off the ABS TCC switch, and that goes through to the relay 1 ignition fuse. So our relay 1 ignition fuse we're going to look at and want to see if it's got a bad power supply. Then we're going to look at our PCM powers and grounds, because I've rarely seen PCMs go bad. It could happen, but I highly doubt it. So we've taken all these and we're going to clump them into a group. What all is common? All those on the PCM except the O2 sensors. Now if we start looking at grounds, your PCM grounds I've got somewhere. Your O2 sensors, ground 114. Your injection control modules, ground 117 on the engine block. O2 sensors 114. And then your PCM has got some grounds that's going to the same places. I believe they're the 117. So the majority of your stuff is going to ground 117, so that could be an issue. Now, the way you figure this out, if I can zoom you in right here, when you're reading a wiring diagram, I know a lot of people get tripped up on these. If you'll look, you've got power ignition 0, power ignition 1, power battery, PCM ground. Basically, you'll follow this little orange wire all the way across the end of the page. It's going to be number 5, orange. So we're going to go to our next page here, number 5, orange. It goes over and up, and then you can see PCM battery fuse 10, and then up here it tells you it's to be hot at all times. Then you've got this one that's going to be hot with off or in run. So basically this helps you, because if you're checking this fuse and you don't have power on it and it's in the start position like you're trying to crank it, it's not going to have power. It's not that you've got a problem, it just does not get power at that time. Now I believe the hot and runs are going to be controlled by the ignition switch, so that could possibly be part of your problem, is that you're losing power through your ignition switch. But whenever we went back and looked at it, let's see, where have I got right here? The majority of these fuses we're looking at, the majority of all these fuses are in the underhood fuse block, and they're actually powered by battery 1 fuse, which is going to be a 50 amp, so it's going to be one of the bigger square fuses, and the ignition 1 fuse, which is a 40 amp, again a bigger square fuse. And they're either going to get power from the ignition switch or straight from the battery, most likely straight from the battery. So you want to make sure your battery cable connections are good. make sure you don't have anything crazy going on there, and you're going to want to check your ground locations, which is going to be in the text I'm sending. So let's see, make sure I'm not missing anything. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to check our powers and our grounds. Like I said in the message, I don't think it's your PCM. To me, it looks more like you're losing power on something. You've got a bad connection somewhere, and that's causing voltage spikes, which is throwing everything out of whack. So I would heavily go towards looking for voltage loss somewhere. It could be a fuse, a connector, it could be a plug-in on the PCM. I'm not sure what all's been done on the car, but I would go back over and double check everything that's been messed with and make sure you don't have any bad ground connections or power connections. And the locations on all of them, I put like G19, ground from battery to right front of engine. So somewhere on the right front of that engine, which would be the front passenger side of the engine, or with it being North Star, yeah, it should be up on the front passenger side. You'll be looking for a main ground coming from the battery. You want to make sure that's good, because if this is bad, everything else is bad. But hopefully the text I wrote, the long text, if you can follow it, will get you to where you need to be. But that's what I look for. Probably going to be a bad power supply, which could be the ignition switch. And another thing to look for in some of the troubleshooting tech tips, it does mention making sure that your spark plug wires are not laying across your ignition control module. I believe it said it's located under the ignition coils, because it can mess with your readings, your circuit readings, whichever code it was. There was a code on here for invalid data or something like that. Oh, right here, the reference circuit, too many pulses. So check that out, and hopefully that'll help you.